Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on today. A shootout between two of the best mid-market luxury dive watches available. It's the Oris Aquis Date Calibre 400 versus the Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter. $3,500 to $5,000 has never bought so much dive watch. Let's start with the Omega, as it is the better known of the two. Now, of course, the original version of this watch dates back to 1993, but the model you see here, as you see it here, was refreshed for the 2018 model year. In stainless steel, it is 42 millimeters in diameter by 13.7 millimeters thick. From lug to lug, it measures fractionally under 50 millimeters. It's basically 50 millimeters. And then it has a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. We'll throw it on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference. I owned the original 41 millimeter version of this watch, and I can tell you they do wear differently. The watch has gotten thicker over the years. It's grown larger in diameter, but it's also much more substantial and objectively better in every way, qualitatively, chronometrically, and aesthetically. There have been some big upgrades. It still fits on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, largely because the end links on this generation of the bracelet are pivoted, whereas on the smaller previous generation, we had solid extended end links. So this actually wears smaller on the wrist than the previous model. Though it is thicker, it should still fit underneath most dress cuffs. I recommend it for wrist as small as 14 centimeters in circumference. Taking a quick look at the bracelet, eyes closed, this is the most obvious improvement. You can jangle and jangle this bracelet in the hand and feel how much less play there is in comparison to earlier versions of the bracelet. Now, the watch, of course, has more squared-off shoulders to the links, which gives this long-running bracelet design a sportier look, but you can still see it has these staggered alignments, staggered-sized, polished intermediate layouts that do look a little bit like a dress bracelet from some angles, so consider it to be versatile. Tough enough to be your sports bracelet, elegant enough to be your dress watch bracelet. Removable links, fixed by screws. You can see there's a little half link built in for fine sizing, but the current version of the watch is the best clasp we've ever seen on a Diver 300 meter. You still have the all-or-nothing pull-out extension, which is as solid as it's ever been, but then there's a push-button slider inside with 9.6 millimeters of incremental sizing adjustment, and the whole thing closes with a snick and a snap. It feels redoubtable, as substantial as it's ever been, and that's before we get to the case. Familiar lyre-style lugs, polished bevels, satin mid-case, and then we have the helium escape valve, which new for 2018 is a conical profile. More important is that you can now open it when you're submerged, whereas the previous helium escape valve would have to be opened prior to the dive. This one can now be opened underwater. It releases helium from the interior of the watch so as not to blow out the seals or the crystal. This is something you will rarely need unless you're a saturation diver, but it's good to know it's there. The watch is 300 meters water resistant. Yes, I know, 300 meters is not 1,000 feet. Press the I believe button. The bezel is sharp and precise. A 120 click adjustment. The ratchet is positive and clear. The only shortcoming is maybe the shallowness of the knurling, which means you want to set this bezel before the dive. You're going to have trouble manipulating it with wet, sweaty, or gloved hands. Now, the insert is in ceramic with cold enamel fill for the indices as well as the numerals. It's quite scratch resistant. The dial is a chromed ceramic. So you can see zirconium oxide beneath the hands. That's the chemical formula for ceramic. For this generation of the watch, the much-loved 1990s and 2000s era Omega Wave has returned, also with applique indices instead of the original 90s version of the watch, which included printed features. The skeletonized, quote, James Bond hands are back, so named because Pierce Brosnan wore this family of Seamaster during his turn as 007. Underneath the case back, we have the Calibre 8800, 35 joules automatic winding, 55-hour power reserve, hacking seconds, quick set date. It's basically amagnetic. I mean, completely resistant to magnetism, not anti-magnetic. It really has no upper threshold. It has a full balance bridge and a free-sprung index for toughness against shock, a coaxial escapement, which makes this pretty much the most exotic escapement you can buy under $50,000, originally invented by George Daniels in 1974. It is a direct and indirect impulse tangential contact escapement that helps to increase power reserve, improve chronometry, and extend the intervals between service. And this watch comes with a 5-year warranty, so they practice that which they preach. Now, the timepiece also goes through the Master Chronometer certification, which meets all of the timing standards of the COSC, but adds water resistance, power reserve, winding efficiency, anti-magnetism, alongside the chronometric test, which, unlike a COSC movement, the chronometric test here is done with the fully cased watch in 6 positions. So there is a lot to love. But This is the most competitive segment of the market, mainstream luxury dive watch, and Oris may have raised the bar for 2021. We have the long-running Aquis Date, but now Calibre 400. First, you need to know this: 10-year warranty. Second, 5 days of power reserve. If that sounds like something you would get from a high horology brand and a dive watch priced in the 5 figures, you're right. But this watch, new or used at this point, is about $3,500. You can knock off a few $100s and get it on the strap. Don't. Buy it on the bracelet and get the strap as an accessory. So new or used, you're going to pay about $3,500 for this watch on the bracelet. Two different sizes are available: 39.5 millimeters, as you see here, and a larger 43.5 millimeter case. So those two sizes straddling the 42 millimeter Seamaster. Throw it on my wrist of 16 centimeters, and for me, this is the one to own. In pure fit terms, it is a little bit thinner, but it's a lot more compact. Lug to lug, it's only 48.1 millimeters across the wrist. It's 13.4 millimeters thick, and again, 39.5 millimeters in diameter. I could recommend this for him or for her, and a wrist as small as 13 centimeters in circumference. So this model, again, no compromise in bracelet, clasp, or movement. This is the Calibre 400 watch, and you can see that there is a lot to love. The bracelet is tapered, and it's equipped with a quick release system. The way this works is you have these underside snaps that basically pull open, just like that. They pull open, and you can replace the bracelet with another bracelet or an Oris factory strap. So you get a quick release strap system that allows you to instantly remove the bracelet or the strap and change it without resorting to tools. Now, despite the price point of this watch, you can see this one's still in very good condition. Someone didn't have much fun with this watch. But we have removable links fixed by screws. You might expect pin sleeves on a bracelet at this price point. Oris impresses by going all the way with screw-fixed removable links. And then we have a trigger-actuated deployant clasp rather than the clamshell that you would expect at this price point. But this isn't a Breitling. They mean to impress, and they do so, with a dive extension built into this clasp as well. There are 3 divots drilled in the clasp, so you can use your strap tool to adjust the anchoring point of the bracelet and the clasp for fine-tuning. So 3 different ways to size: the extension, the divots, and then the removable links. Rolling around to the case, Oris decided not to go with a generic Omega Rolex-style blended lug profile. The lugs actually break out dramatically from the case band. You can see there's a combination of polished lug hoods and satin finished side, and then we have a polished knurled edge to the bezel, and the knurling here is a lot sharper and easier to grip than on the Omega. If you have wet hands, sweaty hands, gloved hands, it's going to be easier to set this bezel than it is with the Omega. Line up the luminescent pearl, and we have a very similar bezel construction, as this is also a ceramic cap, screw down crown, 300-meter water resistance, technically speaking identical in that regard. It does not have the helium escape valve. The dial is of higher quality than we would have seen in the past on Oris. First, you can see the applique indices. It's impressive to see on a watch at this price point because you generally expect a printed dial on a watch at this price point. But then there's also a gradient, and there are a couple of different colors for this dial. Both of these watches can be ordered with straps and with different colored dials, so you're definitely going to want to peruse your option. I like the aquamarine or turquoise color. There's also one that's green. This is the gray-black gradient. Definitely check out your options because you can really tailor this watch, and they will tailor the ceramic of the bezel to match the dial. As you can see, it has the same basic features the Omega does, with a screw-down crown, hacking seconds, and a quick-set date. Flip it over, though, and you can see it's a very different kind of movement. First, impressively, you can see it is a large movement that properly fills out the case back. You can also see that this movement, which has a 5-day power reserve, uses Edachron regulation, meaning it can be timed quite precisely. And you can also see that it is adjusted in 5 positions, just like a chronometer. Now, how well do they adjust it? Well, normally you don't know, except that Oris mentions this watch is supposed to keep time over 24 hours within -3 + 5 seconds, which is impressive and would actually exceed the chronometer certification of -4 + 6 per 24 hours. It beats away at 28,800 vibrations per hour. The idea here is that in addition to the 10-year warranty, you have a 10-year service interval, as Oris doesn't think you should be spending hundreds of dollars every 2 or 3 years servicing your $3,500 watch. The movement's nicely sized. It better fills out the case back of the 39.5 than it does the 43.5. You can see, in addition to the Edachron, which allows a very precise adjustment, there's also a small micrometric rack and pinion fine adjustment mechanism built in. This is a very impressive movement, and it's twin barrel too, which means it's going to have a more even torque release from max wind to minimum wind. Long power reserve watches that have one big barrel tend to fluctuate a lot, whereas here the watch is going to have a lot more timing stability. And whereas the Omega is anti-magnetic to over 15,000 Gauss. This is no slouch, as Oris says it can continue to keep good time, basically unimpeded, after exposures to magnetic fields as strong as 2,250 Gauss, which is a lot more than 1000 Gauss or 1,000 Gauss. Remember, the Rolex Milgauss was 1,000 Gauss, and while the modern version of the watch is more than that unofficially, the fact that they're rating this watch to over 2,200 is deeply impressive. So, which one do I like better? Well, I would have to say, all things considered, the Omega feels like a more luxurious product. In the hand, neither one of these watches embarrasses, but only one of these watches feels as solid as a Rolex Submariner, and that is pretty much the mark for solidity, or a 50 fathoms on the full bracelet, the X71. This watch feels the equal of those, both of which cost a lot more money. So let's talk about the virtues of this watch. We'll talk about each one in turn. Superior clasp, by far. The clasp here just feels more solid. You can see a lot more metal is used too, but once you get into it, the fold-out extension gives you more total extension than on the Oris, and you have that adjustability built in incrementally. You don't have to go all or nothing. You can even leave that fold it in and then just use the incremental slider. We do have the half link on both sides, which I like because it allows further fine-tuning. And then the swing arm is thicker, the gauge of the metal is thicker. Overall, it just inspires more confidence, and it's clearly a more expensive piece. The bracelet feels the same way. Neither one of these embarrasses. They're both built the right way. But this one feels truly the equal of Rolex and Blancpain, and that's not something I often say. It feels the equal of the full bracelet Royal Oak Offshore Diver bracelet. I am saying this thing feels 2, 3, 4, even 5 or 6 times its price. It's very impressive. The watch does have the helium escape valve. A lot of folks don't like that. I like to have it as it represents extra capability, and in fact, Rolex will charge you more if you want an escape valve on a dive watch. You have to step up to a Sea Dweller. I like the fact that the basically entry-level modern dive watch in the Omega catalog gives you that feature right out of the gate. Now, I would say that this watch, because it takes any 20mm strap, is going to be preferable to the system over here because you're going to be boxed into using an Oris factory strap. And while those are nice, dive watches often are all about customizing your strap. And whether you want to go with leather, stingray, rubber, textile, a NATO, you have a lot more flexibility with a normal lug junction. And I think a lot of collectors are going to appreciate that. Also, the movement, in addition to being more anti-magnetic, has a full balance bridge with a free sprung index. And of course over here we have Edicron, the micrometric rack and pinion, and then a single-sided balance cock. So while all that's very good in terms of precision adjustment, I think there's going to be a bit more durability given the architecture here. And Oris boasts that it's now using a staff pivot for its rotor, claiming that's more shock resistant. I have found, and Rolex agrees because it's converted all of its movements over to rotor bearings, but I found that rotor bearings actually do a better job preventing the staff of the rotor from getting fractured. I just think that because there is no staff here and a broad braced bearing, you're less likely to wind up with rotor problems. And again, we're talking about durability issues that represent extreme handling, but I thought I would mention it. Now, speaking of the Oris, the fact that you get 2 case sizes, the 39.5 or the 43.5, is wonderful flexibility. The 10-year warranty and the 10-year service interval, that's incredible. Why in God's name is Patek Philippe still a 2-year warranty in a world where Oris gives you 5 times that? The 5-day power reserve. There's no question. If you're not going to wear your watch every single day, a 5-day power reserve is identical to the Blancpain 50 Fathoms, a watch that costs multiple of what you see right here. It's more than Rolex, it's more than Omega, it's more than Breitling, it's more than Tudor. I don't really know what the peer for this diver is because the combination of the warranty, the service interval, and the power reserve is so impressive in combination. Price. True, this watch costs $5,200 new and $4,450 used, which means there's a little bit of a depreciation here. There is so far no depreciation with these. It's going to be $3,500 on the bracelet, new or used, but still, in both cases, you wind up paying less for the Oris than you do with the Omega. I'm also going to say that in terms of engineering, this is a slick piece. These quick release lugs are really cool, and if you want to accessorize on vacation and just bring another Oris strap with you, it is going to be easier to swap here than it is with the Omega. So while I like the standard lugs on the Omega, I also think this is brilliant and very convenient, and it needs to be called out because this costs money to engineer. I would also say realistically, although the feel and sound of the 2 bezels is pretty much even. I'm not going to give either one the edge. The knurling here is so much sharper that it's easier to get a purchase on the bezel, and you can really see the Omega, although graceful, has a a strangely shallow knurling on its bezel for a dive watch, so advantage Oris. Which one would I rather have? Well, let's do a loom shot first, then we'll call a winner. As you can see, the Omega actually has a much brighter dial, and then it has differential loom. So you have that luminescent pearl that lines up with the green minute hand, and that's sort of the key with a dive watch, making it easy to read your timing reference in the dark. You can see there is a luminescent pearl on the Oris's bezel, but it's not quite as easy to see out of the gate. Having a green hand and a green pearl makes it easy to use your timer in the dark, whereas the Oris, I feel like it's a little bit more complicated and easier to miss, plus the larger luminescent plots on the Omega give it the edge. The only thing the Oris really does better is the minute and hour hand, which you can see are better loomed than the luminescent skeleton hands of the Omega. Given a choice between the two, and I do love them both, I would probably pick the Omega. Eyes closed, holding the Omega, you can imagine you're holding a 50 Fathoms, or Rolex Sea Dweller, or perhaps even a Royal Oak offshore diver. It's that solid. The watch feels so much more expensive than it is. It's attractive, with a dial that is tangibly of higher quality than the admittedly very good Oris. And while it doesn't have all the mechanical advantages, the durability of the movement architecture and the essential immunity to magnetism is worth something to me in this era of high-powered home and office electronics. Whereas this watch has an incredible power reserve and warranty, I feel like this watch has everything else going for it. It's tangibly more luxurious, and in a comparison of luxury dive watches, for me, that is the deciding factor. So guys, let me know in the description below, which of these two watches would you rather have if it's your money on the line? Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.